Welcome into the Wiltfong Whiparound with Steve Wiltfong. Today is Thursday, July 31st, and we are moments removed from a huge decision. We just had a 5-star come off the board. Anthony Tank Jones just moments ago made his decision, so we're going to cover that on today's show. We got Bill Belichick. Yeah, Bill Belichick at UNC making waves on the trail. We're going to cover that also. We got big winners for July. First, guys, do me a favor. Look at this. We're almost to 100K on this channel. I think, can we get there before the season starts? Let me know. Hit subscribe. All right. We got Steve Wiltfong, and we are coming off that Tank Jones news, so we have to talk some Oregon Ducks recruiting. Steve, take us behind the scenes. How does Tank Jones go from the #1 player in the state of Alabama to committing to the Oregon Ducks and continuing to play his college career in Eugene?
Well, I think it starts with the connection he built with Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy and the trust he has in those coaches to get the best out of them and put him in best position to hear his name called high in the NFL draft. The guys that Coach Lanning and Coach Lupoy have been around historically with their time, certainly at Oregon, but Coach Lanning at Georgia and Alabama, Coach Lupoy at Alabama, and some of the stops he's had over his long career. He's been in the NFL. Those are the guys he believes in to get it out of him. He connected with those guys, built a good rapport with them, trusts those guys. Certainly, you don't win this kind of recruiting battle without being heavily armed on the NIL front. I think Anthony Tank Jones is someone that is getting a deal worth over $1 million for his first season. So I think that certainly Oregon, Texas A&M, Alabama, all battled on that front. And then where Oregon's at as a program, he also talked to me about this recruiting class and said, I think we can get Oregon closer to that first national championship that they covet. And so I think he's excited to get there and help continue building this program up. Maybe they win the national title this year and he helps them run it back as a true freshman, just program stability, defensive end, edge rusher track record, connection with the staff, vibe in Eugene. This is where he wanted to go. And I think Oregon then had to check the boxes from an NIL front, and they were able to do that. And how about this, Josh? A secret visit to Oregon in the spring. Not so much a secret visit because Max Torres reported the visit, but then it was refuted like he didn't go. And I think that was because, there was a reason. Everyone has their reasons going through this recruiting process. But that was when my antenna really went up on Oregon. Texas A&M did a great job recruiting him. Alabama, the new staff, he said they had to make up ground during the coaching change, but did that. And certainly those programs gave him a lot to think about. And he gave Alabama and Texas A&M reasons to be optimistic down the stretch in their recruitment. But Oregon was the one that came on strong, definitely going back to the spring. And now he's one of the jewels of this class that has a chance to be ranked #3 by rivals by the end of the weekend.
Really, a really big pickup. Oregon starts the month with a 5-star in Emmanuel Iheanacho. They end the month with Tank Jones committing. Steve, is August setting up to be another big recruiting week or month for Oregon?
Yeah, I can't believe we're turning the calendar to August tomorrow, Josh. This year is flying by, and this 2026 recruiting cycle is coming to a finish, but we have one more big weekend, and the Ducks are already off and running because I count Thursday as the weekend. I always have. That's when the pitcher specials were. That's when the pool tables were the cheapest, and you get started right on Thursday nights. But Oregon ripping and roaring, going into the weekend. Devon Benjamin's going to announce his college decision right here on the Rivals YouTube page on Saturday night. Oregon, Michigan, Texas, some of the finalists. Oregon's always been considered the front runner. Other programs have challenged in this recruitment, but he's always felt at home at Oregon. Coach Hampton, Coach Lanning, Coach Lupoy, that staff, where they're at, the way they develop defensive backs, whether it's from the transfer portal or guys they landed from the high school ranks. I like where Oregon stands for Devon Benjamin. Can they get Deuce Gerald's in the fold? Also one that we are expected to host on the Rivals YouTube page this Saturday around 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Deuce Gerald's is going to announce his college decision. Oregon is the Rivals prediction,
right?
But LSU giving Oregon a run for their money down the stretch. But right now I have the prediction for Oregon for both of them. If they land on both, they will be ranked in the top 3. on the Rivals rankings, and then they go into spatula season. They'll look to flip a wideout. They'll look to flip a defensive lineman. They'll continue to evaluate senior tape. This isn't a huge class right now, but it's extremely talented. Tank Jones joining Kendry Harrison and Manny Iannaccio as 5 stars in the fold. This is another class that will keep Oregon in the national title discussion for years to come.
Steve, haters will say that they bought this class, but I'm here to provide some balance, because if you're going to say Oregon bought this class, then how do you explain missing on Jackson Cantwell? How do you explain missing on Jared Curtis, missing on Chris Henry Jr.? I mean, there's been a lot of guys that Oregon has not gotten for various reasons, maybe not because of NIL, but what is it about this Oregon staff? Because, Steve, when the money's equal on both sides, it comes back down to recruiting.
Well, it's such a cheap and lazy take, and that's just what bitter diehard fans say when they lose a recruiting battle. Oh, they bought him, and certainly there are times where Oregon shows up to the gunfight with a bazooka because they can, and no one should ever apologize for that. And when there's a report by Pete Nakos that insiders say Texas spent the most money on their football roster, I'd stand proud and tall in Austin, because there's no salary cap going into this season. Now they're trying to have a salary cap with rev share. But my point is that there are times where Oregon can flex the biggest muscles from a financial package standpoint, but never is there a time where they're out recruited. Dan Lanning is as engaged a head football coach as there is in the country on the recruiting trail, building meaningful, genuine relationships with top targets, their families, their representatives, their trainers, whoever it is, and he enjoys doing it. He always has, going back to his time at Georgia, recruiting guys like Malachi Starks to beat Clemson for the Bulldogs. Yep. He is now at Oregon, leading the charge on the trail, planting flags. Tosh Lupoy has always been one of the best recruiters in the country too, someone that's just relentless. And then these guys have a track record of development. Look, these guys that they're recruiting want to play at the highest level. And Oregon is a place where they feel like they can be first-round draft picks, play in the biggest games, play for championships, and be prepared to be Sunday guys because of who Lanning, Tosh Lupoy have coached in the past. And so that's what Tank Jones bought into. I think that, as you continue to unpack this recruitment and more things become clear, Oregon's the program he wanted to go to. I think they had to get some things right from the NIL front. I think that was a very competitive conversation as well, because I think he was incredibly important to Texas A&M and Alabama as well. But Oregon got it done on all fronts and just landed one of the best pass rushing prospects in America.
And after having a mini slump in recruiting at the end of May into early June, Oregon really hitting its stride here at the end of summer. I have a feeling at number 6 right now, we could be talking about a top 3 class, maybe even by the end of the weekend. Oregon fans, jump in the chat. Tell us how you're feeling about this class and who your biggest target left on the board is. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk a little UNC. Yeah, that's right, because Bill Belichick is building a top 20 class right here in his first cycle at North Carolina. Steve, Bill Belichick looking to flip somebody in SEC country? Tell us about it.
Look, they got 33 high school commits right now, Josh, for this top 20 class. So while they were very active in the transfer portal in year one, because they had to be to get this roster as competitive as it could this fall, they are not sitting back and looking like and leaning on the transfer portal for years to come. They want to build this program up foundationally through high school recruiting and player development, because that is the recipe for long-term success. So 33 high school players and counting going to be injected into this Tar Heels program in the winter with early enrollees, and then certainly by next summer. And they're looking for a few more guys. And one prospect that they're trending for is 4-star tight end Carson Snead. He's been committed to Tennessee for nearly a year. But in that time, his brother has transferred from Tennessee to North Carolina, first and foremost. He has also entertained Florida, Ole Miss, Miami, Colorado. But North Carolina, as he's told me in the past, the chance to be coached by legendary coaches like Bill Belichick, guys that have coached some of the best tight ends to ever play the game, like Rob Gronkowski. that is exciting for him to come to North Carolina and be in an offense that's going to feature the tight end in some shape or form. So I like the Tar Heels to ultimately flip Carson Snead. So does colleagues Sam Spiegelman and Chad Simmons.
All right. So could be on the horizon more good news coming for Tar Heel fans?
Yeah, that could start Friday, August 1. Billy Moala, a massive 6'3.5", 340-pound defensive tackle, at one point committed to Oregon. He is trending towards North Carolina going into his Friday commitment announcement. And then the Tar Heels later in the month, one of the best players in the Midwest, one of the best two-way players in the country, CJ Sadler out of powerhouse Detroit Cass Tech, could play wide receiver in the secondary on the next level. I like where North Carolina stands for Mr. Sadler. Now, Colorado's a program that's going to continue to push the Tar Heels. Deion Sanders versus Bill Belichick. Maryland's in mix. Michigan State are programs. We'll see if they rise up during the fall. But right now, I like where North Carolina stands, and he is going to announce his commitment on August 15th.
Let's talk big winners. When it comes to recruiting in the month of July, who was the best? I got a couple teams here. It's not really in any order, but maybe it is in the order that I think it is. So at the end, we'll get you guys to chime in and tell us who do you think was the biggest July winner. Now, I got Texas on top at number 4. The commitments of Tyler Atkinson and Derek Cooper. If you told me heading into the summer that it was going to be Texas for those two, Steve, I think this might have been the most shocking recruiting news that I would have been told in the month of June. Obviously not in July. How was Texas able to win out on these out-of-state talents?
Yeah, they were Mariano Rivera on the recruiting trail this summer with the way they closed some of these recruitments. And it just shows how Texas is able to create an opportunity for these young men off the field while also them having the product on the field to get the best out of them. Look, they're in the college football playoff this past year, won a game. They're in the conversation to win the national championship this fall. They've had high draft picks at key positions. And Steve Sarkisian has just changed the identity of that program, one that was soft to one that is very physical around the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Tyler Atkinson, he was someone that Georgia led for much of his process. Also had a keen eye at Clemson, Ohio State, Auburn, Oregon, USC at various points in his process. But Texas, he trains in Austin. He's been there several times. The Longhorns got the last official visit the weekend of June 20th. And I think what they offered off the field to go along with Anthony Hill Jr., one of the top linebackers in college football this year, the opportunity to step in and replace him as a true freshman next fall was too much for Tyler Atkinson to pass up on. And then Derek Cooper, look, there was a lot of Georgia buzz, some Ohio State buzz, but Texas hit the gas on him this summer. I think they were the biggest NIL offer for Derek Cooper. Again, the way the running backs have played historically at Texas and recently adding his name to that list all go hand in hand. And Texas was able to land two of the premier players in the country, the number 1 linebacker and number 2 running back per the Rivals industry rankings.
Just an incredible run. I mean, they land.
James J.J. Johnson was huge too. I mean, look, that was one looked like Texas maybe led in the spring. Georgia led a lot of that recruitment, even got him committed. But Texas never went away. They did what they had to do off the field as well and got James J.J. Johnson in the fold.
They land Samari Matthews, John Turntine, Kosi Akpala. It was just a great run.
So Samari Matthews was one. Spring visit took the lead. Official visit reiterated what he saw in the spring. That was more of an old school caliber recruiting win. Certainly, again, they were competitive on an NIL front for Samari Matthews, but that wasn't a late win like some of the others were.
Yeah. Then you had Oregon, 5-star offensive tackle Emmanuel Iheanacho at the beginning of July. They get edge Tank Jones at the end of July. Mix in there a flip of Tommy Tofi from Cal. You also had Devin Jackson and Jalen Lott commit to Oregon. I mean, Dan Lanning, after maybe, if you want to call it, a slump in late May, early June, boy, did they ever bounce back in the month of July.
Yeah, the Ducks, you knew that they were going to have their time on the recruiting trail. Dan Lanning and company, they're some of the most engaged recruiters in the country. They build real, authentic relationships with top targets. And then when it comes to NIL, they can be as competitive as they want to be, depending on the prospect and how much value they have in each target. And sometimes they're not the highest bid, and sometimes they bring the bazooka to the gunfight, but they're the ones that are on fire right now. Manny Iannaccio was someone that was kind of a fluid recruitment, but they led early for him, saw Maryland take the lead, but they got it back on his official visit to Oregon, or excuse me, got it back on his spring visit to Oregon, maintained it through his official visit, and then had the pre-4th of July fireworks landing him. Devin Jackson was a big pickup for them out of the Sunshine State. Jalen Lott, one of the top two-way players in the country. They value him at wide receiver, so him and Messiah Hampton are two electric, high upside receivers that are still developing physically, guys that could be really dynamic in that Oregon offense. And then today, Anthony Tank Jones beating Alabama and Texas A&M, going into the Yellowhammer State for a second straight cycle and landing the #1 player from that state, another 5-star headed to Oregon, Anthony Tank Jones. And it wasn't just NIL. It was Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoy, what they've done historically, developing pass rushers, this program being in the hunt for the national championship, the way he felt at home in Eugene. That's why he is an Oregon Duck.
All right. Another team that had an outstanding month of July was Georgia. They landed 5-star tight end Caden Prothro, another excellent tight end in Brandon Fogel. Defensive lineman from Sweden, Valdon Sohn, linebacker Nick Abrams, and safety Tyree Green. I mean, if it wasn't for the misses on Tyler Atkinson and the flip of James Johnson, I think Georgia would probably be considered one of the best class in the month of July if it weren't for these heroic efforts by Oregon and Texas. Caden Prothro, though, that was a huge in-state get. Nick Abrams was was a highly, highly coveted linebacker that they land over Michigan. Georgia had a great month.
Yeah, they beat Oregon for Nick Abrams too. So, look, Georgia, what they are as a program, they're the most dominant college football team right now under Kirby Smart and company. And I'm talking over the course of, the last 7-8 years, right? They've been the most consistent program. They're always on the short list to compete for the national championship. They're the defending SEC champs again. And the NFL draft is always a showcase of Georgia players, hearing their names called early and often. And that's why top targets want to play there. And they're in the conversation for the nation's best year in and year out. Win some, lose some, but recruiting's about who you get, not who you don't get. And we know that Coach Smart and his staff are as good as anybody of getting the best out of their players and putting them in positions for personal success and team success and a chance to play championship football every Saturday and being in those right conversations at the end of the year. Caden Prothro is obviously a special talent, extremely long, can stretch the field. He's averaged over 20 yards per catch throughout his high school career. One of the most prolific pass catchers, regardless of you're talking about a tight end, a slot, a receiver. He is one of the more exciting players in the country with the ball in his hands, a threat to score anytime he touches it. And Nick Abrams is a guy that Georgia coveted, and no program has done a better job of developing linebackers than Kirby Smart, Glenn Schumann, and company. And Nick Abrams has the size, the upside physically. He's an instinctive player that's especially terrific playing against the run.
All right, another excellent class here by Alabama. Now at number 7 after the Tank Jones commitment. Alabama had a run on 5 stars in the month of July. Could have been 3 for 3, but they land Sedarian Morgan at wide receiver, Jaira Edwards. They go out and they get another quarterback in Taden Kawa, and they flip offensive tackle Bear Fretwell from Georgia Tech, a prospect that they've kind of been eyeing and liked a lot. Alabama, even without the addition of Anthony Tank Jones, still a really solid month.
Jaira Edwards is one of the more impressive recruiting wins of the cycle, someone that Alabama took the lead for in the spring. And then when he got back to campus the weekend of June 6th, committed to the Tide and shut down his process before going public with his plans over the 4th of July, kind of an old school recruitment where he knew where he wanted to go. He believes in that coaching staff, Coach Mo Linguist, Coach Kane Womack and company. And he's someone that, in addition to the physicality he plays with, and he's going to be ready to be a day one difference maker with where he's at physically. His leadership qualities and intangibles that he brings to the table are as strong as any player in this 2026 class. So Jaira Edwards picking Alabama was a major coup for Coach Kalen DeBoer and company.
All right. The month of July was a hot one. Probably also worth mentioning LSU, UF, Tennessee, and North Carolina. as teams that were hot in July. Now, I kind of ordered this in who I thought was the number one team in the month of July. I obviously am leaning towards Texas. Steve, do you have a favorite for July?
No, I agree with you with Texas and the way that they closed that month and went from a program that I believe was outside the top 15, top 20 to where they're at in the standings right now, coming off finishing with the number one class last year. They continue to show that when their top targets are ready to make their decisions, that they can't be slept on. LSU's a program that's looking to have a big August, just like Oregon. Darius Gray, five-star offensive lineman, going to come off the board later next month, August 22nd. My predictions on LSU: can they hold off South Carolina? Can they hold off Tennessee? Jace Matthews is going to commit next month. Rivals number 2 ranked receiver. LSU is one of the finalists. You have Texas A&M involved. Auburn. There's some confidence around the Plains, but LSU is a program that's certainly near the top of the list for Jace Matthews as well. And then can they beat Oregon on Saturday for Deuce Gerald's? You know, they're coming on strong down the stretch. People around that recruitment say, don't sleep on the Bayou Bengals for Deuce Gerald's. And I know that we're leaving some guys off. Darius McKinley is committing this weekend. LSU's been the longtime favorite for the legacy recruit. His older brother, Dominic McKinley, plays for the Tigers. So LSU in the middle of some of these high-end recruiting battles as we go into the month of August.